Maharaj, another question I have is, if there is a God, like you said there is a God, why are there so many problems in this world?
This is such a beautiful question and a normal question, and it's answered extensively in Jaiva Dharma again by Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur. The principle is that the Lord, God, loves us so deeply we can't even imagine. We are ourselves entirely responsible for this suffering condition we find ourselves in. It's very, very important to understand this. At this age, the victim concept or consciousness, or what do you call it, victim what?
The suffering person?
No, the role of victim. When someone thinks they're a victim.
Oh, the victimized, the victim consciousness.
Well, you know, it's that they don't use consciousness, they use something else. Anyway, thinking that you're a victim of circumstances is very, very common. I feel so sorry for myself. I bring my sad violin out and I start telling the world how unhappy I am, and none of it's my fault. And I'm so innocent and good, but I'm not. I have turned away from the highest principle of life, which is my service to God. And that suffering is to bring me back to Him who loves me. I have caused my own suffering. There was a time when I had a split-second choice to turn towards His beautiful face or turn towards this Mayic energy. At that point in time, I turned towards this Mayic illusion. And this is called an offense to God Himself. If I turn away from you while you're speaking to me and I just start having a conversation with somebody else, you're going to think that I'm quite rude. You're going to think that's quite offensive.
Yeah.
What to speak of turning away from that most beautiful personality, that most sweet personality, who knows how much we actually really love Him, but we have forgotten this love, or we have not understood that love, and instead we've turned away. So that's called an offense, turning away from God. And the result of this offense is that material desires will spring in the heart. This is astonishing, how the way it's set up like this. We are completely responsible for turning away, and we're also responsible, therefore, for having these material desires spring up. And as soon as there are material desires to enjoy the material world, there must be suffering, because the soul cannot enjoy material elements. The soul is pure spirit. Pure spirit cannot be nourished by anything that is material. It's not going to satisfy us. For example, we can perhaps understand if you feel some tremendous joy when you feel some relationship with a friend or whatever. From that friendship you feel some tremendous joy. That has nothing to do with, well, it does have to do with material object, because if you're thinking in relationship to another material body, like if a husband towards a wife or a boyfriend and girlfriend, they feel very elated in their relationship. That is sort of a reflection of the spiritual joy.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense.
But that's not a lasting joy, because the girlfriend or the boyfriend, ultimately, eventually, one of them has to die. So it's not an eternal state of joy. Something that is spiritual is eternal. It never, ever diminishes. It actually increases and increases at every moment in bliss and joy. This is the nature of spirit. We have to know distinctly what is the difference between material and spiritual. This is really fundamental. The mind is material. The mind is not spiritual. But we start to be confused that the mind is spiritual. But spirit is beyond matter. So if we cultivate that consciousness of trying to understand my deeper spiritual self, then a great happiness comes in the heart. And automatically we find no interest in material life particular. It has no more meaning because we have no more ambition to exploit it. But this is the reason for our suffering, that we're trying to exploit the material energy for my happiness, but my soul can never be happy tasting material pleasure.
So would you say that all types of suffering, especially like mental sufferings, like depression, phobias, anxieties and fears, they have their origin in our separation from God?
Ultimately, yes. Ultimately, definitely. All these fears, there's a beautiful verse in the Sanskrit. It says Bhayam, which means fear, Dvitiya biniveshitam syat. This means that when one is absorbed in material consciousness, then fear must be present. As long as I'm thinking that I'm this mistaken identity of being the body and the mind rather than the soul, I'm acting in my life trying to satisfy my body. I'm acting in my life trying to satisfy my mind. These are the principles that I'm looking to satisfy. Then I will always be frustrated.
Yeah, it seems to be, by observation, when you observe everyone in this world, people always seem to hanker for something they haven't got, and they seem to lament for the things they have lost, and they never ever seem to be satisfied.
This is interesting because when we see something beautiful or any object in this material world, we have simultaneously a desire to own that object. We think, if I own that beautiful house, I'll be happy. If I own that beautiful girl, I'll be happy. If I own that beautiful man, I'll be happy. If I own that beautiful car, I'll be... This idea of ownership, I don't have the capacity just to see it and appreciate it for its beauty. This scream of ownership has to constantly be pushing my desire. I want to own this. It creates frustration. It's described that when the soul first falls into the darkness of this material world, he's covered by 5 types of ignorance. And one of those types of ignorance, it's like an impression is placed on the consciousness, and that impression is that one desires what is called false ownership. One desires to own things, and we're thinking that that ownership is going to make me happy. Another is frustration after fear. Another is fear of death. Another is illusion about my identity. And also the 5th is illusion about this whole world. So these 5 types of ignorance are placed over the soul to give him an opportunity in that illusion state to actually think that he can be happy here. If you didn't have those 5 coverings, you wouldn't look for happiness in the material world.
That is interesting.
And once those 5 types of ignorance become purified, and you know that you cannot find happiness here, then your future, your vision becomes very much focused on something so much higher than anything in this realm. And then we must have guidance. We must have guidance by someone who is already in a liberated condition.
But there are so many gurus everywhere.
So we have to look at them closely.
How do we know what is real guru?